my study. And so I'm going to read Ecclesiastes chapter 8 before we start going through the book. Or it might look like a book, your notes that are in front of you. But I'm going to read through chapter 8, and then I'm going to come back and we'll go through it verse by verse. So Ecclesiastes 8, and you follow as I read verse 1. Who is as the wise man, and who knoweth the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom maketh his face to shine, and the boldness of his face shall be changed. I counsel thee, writes the king Solomon, to keep the king's commandment, and that in regard of the oath of God. Be not hasty to go out of his sight. Now that his is the king. Be not hasty to go out of the king's sight, and stand not in an evil thing, for he doeth whatsoever pleaseth him. Now where the word of a king is, there is power or authority. And who may say unto him, What doest thou? Whoso keepeth the commandment shall feel no evil thing, and a wise man's heart discerneth both time and judgment. Now, because to every purpose there is time and judgment, and therefore the misery of man is great upon him. For he knoweth not that which shall be, for who can tell him when it shall be? There is no man that hath power over the Spirit to retain the Spirit, neither hath he power in the day of death. And there is no discharge in that war, neither shall wickedness deliver those that are given to it. Now all this have I seen, writes the king, and applied my heart unto every work that is done under the sun. There is a time wherein one man ruleth over another to his own hurt. And so I saw the wicked buried, who had come and gone from the place of the holy, and that would be the temple. And they were forgotten in the city where they had so done. This is also vanity. Because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Now, though a sinner do evil 100 times, and his days be prolonged, yet surely I know that it shall be well with them that fear God, which fear before him. But it shall not be well with the wicked, neither shall he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he feareth not before God. There is a vanity which is done upon the earth, and that there be just or righteous men to whom it happeneth according to the work of the wicked. Again, there be wicked men to whom it happeneth according to the work of the righteous. And I said that this also is vanity, that means empty, futile. Then I commended mirth, because a man hath no better thing under the sun than to eat and to drink and to be merry. For that shall abide with him of his labor the days of his life, which God giveth him under the sun. Now when I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done upon the earth, for also there is that neither day nor night seeth sleep with his eyes. Then I beheld all the work of God, that a man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. Because though a man labor to seek it out, yet he shall not find it. Yea, further, though a man think to know it, yet shall he not be able to find it. It's almost like a word salad when you go through it the first time, right? One thing after another, and you're like, what is all of this about? Well, I'm being paid this morning to tell you what it's all about, and I hope I can accomplish that. So open your Bible and follow with me. So we're going to go back, and I'm going to break it down. The verses on the PowerPoint are going to be the verses in your Bible. But on your outline, you'll see my attempt to put notes in that I think you'll find that amplify it. So let's look at it again. Now, look at verse 1. And again, I'm not trying to trick you with questions, but I will ask you questions. So when you come to verse 1, who is verse 1 about? Who is the subject in verse 1? Huh? All right, the wise man is the subject. So we read in verse 1, Solomon's writing, and he says, who is as the wise man? Now, a wise man here, and I put the amplification here, is someone that is shrewd, they're understanding, they are prudent, they're wise. And who knoweth the interpretation or the explanation or the solution of a thing. A man's wisdom maketh his face to shine, and the boldness of his face shall be changed. So, as you look at verse 1, the subject is the wisdom and the countenance of a wise servant. Now, let's look at a couple of things here and not spend a lot of time on this. Okay, so who is the wise man? Well, the wise man is someone who knows the interpretation of a thing. So he has some insight into truth. Then it goes on and says, and a man's wisdom maketh his face to shine. So the beginning of wisdom, or wisdom begins where? With a fear of God, all right? So when we're talking about a wise man, we know from other passages of Scripture, the wise man is the man who fears God. Well, who fears God? The man who is righteous. So we're looking in verse 1 at a righteous man. Now, the effect of the righteous man is that it makes his face to what? Say it. It makes his face to shine, and the boldness of his face shall be changed. Now, I'm going to refer you to when Cain slew Abel, or when Cain brought the wrong offering to God. He brought a fruit offering, and his brother brought a meat offering, a sacrifice. And the Lord confronted Cain in Genesis chapter 3, and regarding his disobedience, and God said to Cain, why is your countenance what? Fallen. So the point is this: the nature of man is that our countenance will reveal often what's in our heart. Now, obviously, a hypocrite can put on a happy face, so we understand we can fake it, but we can only fake it for a while. And so when you look at verse 1, and we're talking about a wise man, well, it makes his face to shine, and the boldness of his face shall be changed. So a wise man who fears God and is righteous, and he has no fear of God's judgment in the sense that I've done wrong, therefore I'm going to be chastened. And that man has a certain boldness in his character. In the culture that we live in today, the liberal left, the lunatics of the left, and I'm not just talking politics, I'm talking about the sin nature of man. They are very bold and in your face. The reason for that is if they can shut down contrary voices, then they have achieved their position. But their attacks are not based upon righteousness or reason. Often the attack of the left is lawless and evil. And so if we give ground as the righteous ones, if we give ground to the wicked, then we have silenced not only truth, but we've allowed ourselves to be intimidated by that which is wrong. Therefore, wise men and women who know the Lord and we know His truth, we have a reason to be bold. We have a reason to shine in the midst of darkness. So I told my wife yesterday as we had time of prayer and all, I told her, and I don't know if you feel that, I said, it's exciting living in this culture right now because they're delusional. They don't know anything. They have literally gone off the edge into lunacy. And it's exciting to know the truth. But we have to be bold. We have to let our faces shine with God's love and God's truth. If you look at people in the culture today, usually the faces around us are either sad or they're angry. Right? Very, very little happiness in this culture. But that should not be true of us. There ought to be not only a boldness in our lives, but we also ought to shine in the midst of this darkness. The saying goes, the darker the culture, the brighter the light. Agree? The darker a room is, a candle, it illuminates, and it goes far more further than you would think it would. So that's my interpretation of verse 1. Anybody got an opinion before I move on? Let's go on to verse 2. All right? So looking at verse 2, Solomon again writes, I counsel thee to keep the king's commandment, and that in regard of the oath of God. So we began verse 1 with the wise man. Now we're looking at the character of a wise servant. So what is the relationship that a wise servant has with the king? Well, let's look at it. Ecclesiastes 8 and verse 2 then. The first is this: wise servants know the king's command is the law. So we read this then. I counsel thee to keep the king's command, and that in regard of the oath of God. And so living in a monarchy in which the king's word is the law, Solomon says, then keep the king's command. So what does a wise servant do? He keeps the king's command. Another one, verse 3. Now this is very instructive in verse 3. Again, we're thinking about a servant. So here we read in verse 3, be not hasty to go out of the king's sight. Stand not in an evil thing, for he doeth whatsoever pleaseth him. So there's three truths that are found in verse 2 and 3. Here's the first one then. Wise servants fear and revere the king. So why would you be hasty to go out of the king's presence? If you're the king and you're sitting on the throne, and let's say you're the king of your domain and your children happen to be under your rule, your children will avoid your presence if they have done wrong. Agree? Generally, their children will flee the presence of the parent. Why? You've done wrong. You don't want to be found out. You don't want to be revealed. So here, the counsel of the king is when you're in the king's presence, don't be hasty to get out of his presence. Why? Because if I'm the king and I'm sitting on the throne, I'm wondering, why is James Biagiotti so anxious to get out of here? What is going on, right? You're not just looking at the action, but you're looking at the relationship. And so Solomon says, if you're a wise servant, you're not going to be hasty to get out of the king's presence. You're going to stand there with a certain confidence, lest you be thought to be other than a man of integrity. I'm going to go to another thought then that goes with that. So the thought is this then: do not desert or abandon the king. The king might be sitting in judgment. The king might be sitting in council. The king might be looking for advice and direction from other people. And so the counsel to a wise servant is, wait, don't rush out of the king's presence. Don't desert him, especially in a difficult hour. Don't abandon him. And then another thought that goes with that is this: do not defy the king. They avoid the company of rebels. So look at the middle part of the verse 3 here then. Be not hasty to go out of the king's sight. Stand not in an evil thing. Well, what would be an evil thing towards a king? It would be an uprising or a rebellion, right? And so, if you're a wise servant, number one, don't rush out of the king's presence. Be there for him. Number two, in that, stand not in an evil thing. If others are involved in rebellion and insurrection and plotting and planning, don't stand there. Get away from it. Back out from it. And then finally, a warning, the last part, for he doeth whatsoever pleaseth him. Nobody tells the king what to do, right? You might advise the king, but no one is going to tell the king what to do. So here's the thought on your outline. Wise servants understand that the king's authority is absolute and that he acts as he pleases. So we have all of that in that one verse there. One, don't rush out of the king's presence. I'm going to turn this around. And let's say that you are an employer. You have a company, you have people working for you. And if you have an employee that avoids your presence as the boss, as the employer, your antenna ought to go up. Why are they avoiding me? Why aren't they engaging with me? Mark Knack, you run a company, right, at GFS, and you have probably had this when employees start skirting to be near you or around you or engage with you. So there's things that we might reveal about ourselves in how we respond to authorities in our life. Over the years, I'm blessed with probably the best staff I've ever had. But over the years, I've had some staff that weren't so good. And in a staff meeting, they disengage, pull out a phone or do something like that, which, that's death with me, but disengage. So these are the principles we're looking at are wise principles. They are applicable. I look back to 2016 and Donald Trump, whether you like him or love him or hate him, but in 2016, he was not a wise man when it came to people that were around him. He just wasn't. And, you have to, in leadership, be discerning of people that are there. All right, moving on. Here's another thought then. Then the king's word is the law. And then verse 4, all of this is now in verse 4. Where the word of a king is, there is power. And who may say unto the king, what doest thou? So two thoughts with that. The king's word is the law. He does as he pleases. Number two, only the most conscientious servant dares ask, what doest thou? Now, I put the word conscientious in there, but I could have put even the word loyal. Someone that is truly loyal to the king, and in a monarchy, the king represents the state or the kingdom. If you really are concerned about the state of the nation or the state of a kingdom, you will, as a servant, be bold enough to ask the king, why are you doing what you're doing? What doest thou? Now, only the most conscientious and trusted and loyal servant will get away with asking the king to think about what you're doing or think about what you are saying. And so, again, and who may say unto him, what doest thou? Only the loyal and conscientious one dare ask the king, what are you doing? Anybody, feel free to raise your hand or comment as I go through this. I know I've studied it, and now you're getting the dump truck load here. Let's go to verse 5. Whoso keepeth the commandment shall feel no evil. So if you keep the law or keep the commandment, you're not going to feel any evil thing. And a wise man's heart discerneth both time and judgment. So here's the thought on verse 5. Wise servants who obey the king's command have no reason to fear his wrath. Now, generally, that's going to be true unless you have a unlawful, wicked leader who then you don't know if you're going to become the victim of his anger and tyranny. And then I'll give you a second thought that goes with that one there. Wise servants discern the times and the seasons of God's judgment. So I want to look at that for a moment then. So again, we're looking at verse 5. Whoso keepeth the commandment shall feel no evil. He'll not be sorrowful. A wise man's heart, his mind, his affections, discern both time and judgment. Now, why is that important? Because there's a time and there's a season to address the king. I'll give you an illustration. Joseph's brothers come back to Egypt. They come to Egypt for grain. He recognizes them immediately as Hebrew shepherds. But he is the second only to Pharaoh in Egypt. So he's standing up at the grain dispensary, and these Hebrew men, 10 of them, Benjamin was left at home, are standing in front of him. Does Joseph reveal who he is to the brothers? Do you remember? He didn't. Why didn't he reveal who he was to his brothers? Why didn't he suddenly go running and say, Judah, Reuben, Why didn't he all of a sudden break protocol and embrace his brothers? I mean, after all, it had been many years. So what do you think? Huh? He put him... He didn't discover himself to them, but that is true. But why didn't he? Doc? Say it again. He wanted to see if they had changed. In other words, there is a time and a season to deal with problems. Right? The right time, a check on your attitude, a check on their attitude. Before you deal with the problem, it's got to be the right time, it's got to be the right place. And so it is with Joseph, as my illustration here this morning, that Joseph, though everything within him wanting to bridge the gap between him and his brothers, he spoke to them harshly. And then he took one of the brothers and put him in prison. And he sent the others away and said, don't come back unless you bring the youngest brother. And so he was very harsh, but he was testing their spirit. There was a time and a season. You might be, some of you might be a little bit like I am. I tend to speak everything I know. And over the years, you have to learn to be measured in revealing what you know. I'll give you another, for instance, Nehemiah. Nehemiah is the wine cupbearer. He's the cupbearer for Artaxerxes, I believe it was. And he received the news that everybody living in Jerusalem are in despair. They're overwhelmed with sorrow. The temple has been built, but the people are suffering greatly. And for several days, if not weeks, the spirit of Nehemiah, though heavy, did not reveal to the king how broken his spirit was. So quite a bit of time went by, and then one day Artaxerxes looks at him and he says, why are you downcast? What is wrong with you? And then we read that Nehemiah said a prayer, and then he said to the king, well, of course I'm down, because my people in Israel, my people, they are suffering. They are being abused. And he started unfolding all that had happened. My point again is that Nehemiah knew, with the supreme ruler of the known world, that there was a time and a place to speak the truth. A truth that might have upset the king. So go back to this. A wise man's heart discerneth both time and judgment. Put it in another way. Somebody comes to you with a problem or something they're unhappy with. Your first impulse might be to say something. But if you're wise, you might rein in your words until you have in your own heart discerned the right thing to say and the right thing to do. Comments. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say on the verse there, a wise man's heart discerneth. That discerning is his wisdom at work.
His insight, his discernment.
Because he is wise, he has wisdom. And what I found in life, and what you have already said, is that the situation, what the right process is. And I think we've all been guilty of speaking ahead or doing something that we would later regret.
Commit to something you shouldn't have committed to, whatever.
Should have waited and assessed
Right.
the situation because it was worthy of assessment.
All right, somebody else. There's a time and a season, right? And sometimes you need to seek the mind of the Lord. Other times you need to seek not only the mind of the Lord, but you need to seek wise counsel. Let me go to the next verses, verses 6 through 14. The wise men fear and trust the Lord. So we're going to begin with verse 6 here. So wise men fear and trust the Lord. Again, we're looking at the qualities of wisdom or wise men and women. So here's what we read, verse 6 and verse 7. Because, or indeed surely, to every purpose there is time and judgment. And interesting, the word purpose there is really joy, delight, and a pleasure. And so, because to every purpose, every joy, every delight, there is time, there's an occasion, and then there's judgment, there's a decision, a sentence. Therefore, the misery of man is great upon him. Now, let me give you the thought that goes with this. Wise men trust in the sovereignty and the providence of God. Now, we're going to go back to every purpose there is a time. That might remind you of Ecclesiastes 3, verse 3. I think it says, to everything there is a season, right? There's times of joy, there's times of sorrow, there's times of life, there's times of death. To everything there is a time. Now, going on with that, therefore, and judgment, a decision, a sentence. Therefore, the misery or the depravity of man is great upon him. Now, I'm going to go on to verse 7. For he knoweth not that which shall be. For who can tell him when it shall be? Now, it could be suggested that in this might be death, or it might be sickness, or maybe a fear of what might be, something that is coming. How bad is it going to be? Sometimes we look at life and we say, man, I wish I could know the future. Any of you ever wish you could look ahead? I mean, if you could know the future, you would know how to invest, you would know when to pull your money out, you would know what to do, what not to do, if you could see the future. But none of us can see the future. We can have the revelation of God's Word, but only God knows what His timetable is. In fact, the Lord Jesus Christ said as the Son, He didn't even know when He was coming again. That was known only by the Father. Now, I don't understand that, but I accept that. So, again, wise men trust in the sovereignty and the providence of God. There's some things we can't explain, and we simply have to accept God has a plan. What is God doing? I don't know what God is doing, but I do know this. He's promised that whatever it is He's doing is going to be for His glory and for my good. What does it feel good? It doesn't matter how it feels. Am I willing to accept that God's promises are true? Now, that takes me to a second thought then. Wise men acknowledge that there are 4 things that are beyond your control. The 4 things beyond your control. Now, in this verse, verse 8, are 4 things, all right? And so we're going to read the verse, and then we're going to go back. So I'll point them out, and then we'll try to explain them, all right? So there's 4 things in this verse that are beyond your control. Number 1, verse 8. There is no man that hath the power, 1, over the Spirit, and that is literally the wind or the breeze, wind currents, we could say. There is no man that hath the power over the Spirit to retain the Spirit. Number 1. Number 2, neither hath a man power in the day of death. Number 3, there is no discharge in that war. Number 4, neither shall wickedness deliver those that are given to it. So 4 things that you and we can't control. All right, go back to verse 1. The first one is this. There is no man that hath the power, the authority, who is sovereign over the wind to retain the Spirit. Number one, men can predict wind currents, but no one can contain them. Sheila and I, each morning, there's a guy with a podcast called Max Velocity. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a weather forecast. He talks faster than Ben Shapiro does. If you know anything about Ben Shapiro, just like that. But we often will look at his podcast, and he predicts where the winds are going. He predicts where the tornadoes are going to set down, and he's often very right. But what he doesn't do is control them. All right? So, 4 things that men can't control. We can't control the weather, can we? You know, we can seed clouds and we can drop aluminum from the sky and act like it's not going to affect anybody. Chemtrails, they call them. They could control that somewhat. But last summer, when the hurricane went up the coast, the west coast of Florida, and ended up in Asheville, North Carolina, causing floods. If I had said Asheville, North Carolina is going to have a flood, a hurricane, you guys would have thought, that is lunacy. Well, it happened, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it from happening. It was a disaster. But men cannot control the wind currents. Number 2, let's go back. All right, number 2, neither hath he power in the day of death. We could argue that a man can commit suicide, but the fact is, most of us, generally the spirit of man, desires to live. And so man cannot avoid or dictate his death, nor determine how it will occur. We're going to get in our automobiles after service, and we're going to drive home. You would like to say you will always arrive safely at home, and there's never going to be a problem. But the reality is that sometimes people begin a journey and it comes to a tragic end. They didn't plan it, but a man doesn't have control of his death. Go back, another. Thirdly, and there is no discharge in that war. Now, looking at your outline here, there is no discharge, no sending, mobilization, discharging in that war. And so I put down the third interpretation, the law of war. No man can cheat death in battle. All right, in a disciplined army. Especially, I'll give illustration of the Civil War. If you were fighting in the Civil War, either on the Union side or the Confederate side, and you were told to go into battle, but you decided to cut and run, the officers were told to shoot you if you're running from the battle. Why? Because your influence of being a coward or flee in the battle would end up encouraging others to do the same. And so when you go into battle, you really don't have control of whether you're going to die on that battlefield. If you turn to flee, you're going to be killed. If you stay in the battle, you might be killed, but you don't know what the outcome of the battle is going to be. And then the last one. The violence of evil men will not deliver them from the consequences of their wickedness. The latter part then says this: neither shall wickedness deliver those that are given to it. Put it in another way. The violence of an evil man inevitably will not deliver him from the consequences of his wickedness. We're living in a culture right now of lawlessness. And that culture of lawlessness has emboldened the wicked. And they think by their violent acts or their violent words that they are going to escape the consequences of their wicked choices. And the point that Solomon makes here is that you can be violent and vile in your language, but inevitably you're going to suffer the consequences of your wickedness. Thoughts? I'm only going to get to one more, so let's go to the next verse then. Here's verse 9. Now Solomon, using very much that idea of the preacher who has been looking on and watching, and so he says this then, all this have I seen, I've observed, and applied my heart unto every work that is done. I've been thinking about it. I've been musing over it. I've been, just contemplating all that is done under the sun. And then he goes on and he writes, there is a time wherein one man ruleth over another to his own hurt. Now the question is, who is getting hurt? Let me give you a thought that goes with that. And I believe it is this, that a tyrant's rule will inevitably meet a violent end. One that comes to mind would be Hitler in World War II. And the great sorrows that he brought upon not only the Jewish people, but actually there were far more Bible believers, those that professed to be Christians, that were killed than the Jews. Not in any way belittling that, because the Jews are such a great minority. But the fact is this, that Hitler, the tyrant that he was, came to a violent end. And so it is with man. Now again, there is a time wherein one man rules over another, inevitably to his own hurt. I keep watching and knowing the lawlessness of the last few years in our nation, and I keep wondering, are we ever going to see anybody in leadership in handcuffs and pay the penalty of the evil that they have done? I will believe that the swamp is drained when the wicked are handcuffed and taken away. And until I see that, I don't believe there's justice. Do you? The wicked ought to, in God's justice, come to a violent end, is the point. Comments? I'm not trying to be provocative in any of this. I will say this. If we knew the Bible better, we would understand that a lot of our concepts of justice are rooted in the Scriptures. The further American culture gets away from truth, the more insane it is in its judicial process. The further we get removed from truth, the more vile we become as a nation. Let me move on. Here's another then. Wise men know there is a payday someday. So I won't be able to finish it, but let me give it a good try. Verse 10. Again, Solomon writing, he says, I saw the wicked buried. Now he's talking about a funeral. I saw the wicked buried, who had come or entered and gone from the place of the holy. Well, the holy place was the temple. So Solomon's writing, he says, I was watching and I saw the wicked and their funeral. They had come and gone from the place of the holy. They had publicly been seen as a pious, religious people. And they were forgotten in the city where they had so done. So done what? So done wickedness. This is also vanity. Give you a thought with this here, and it is this. The vanity of the funeral of the wicked. Here's the thought. In a culture that lacks righteous values, we soon forget the works of the wicked. So here we have a wicked man. He was no doubt an oppressor of innocent people, being a wicked man. He took advantage of people. He crushed the poor. He crushed the widow, whatever his wickedness was. But outwardly, he was pious, for he was coming and going from the temple, the holy place. And they were forgotten, these wicked people, in the city where they had so done what? So done wickedness. This is also vanity. The nature of a depraved culture is that the further we get from the evil actions of a man, the more they began to be remembered fondly. And we forget their wickedness. Anyone? Need me to keep going? All right, verse 11. Because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. I don't have to explain verse 11, do I? Delays in delivering justice embolden the wicked in their sin. When you don't punish the criminal becomes bolder. That's the lawlessness of the United States right now. We have, as a culture, not punished evil. And as a result of that, the wicked are bolder than ever. That's why if you can put a criminal in jail, take him in front of a courtroom, and release him onto the streets. Only to do what? Only to commit an even greater evil. Because it's not punished speedily, they continue to get bolder in their sin. Again, we as a nation, and I can't think of the legal phrase, but I think under the Constitution we're supposed to be guaranteed is it a speedy trial? What's the right word? I'm missing it. Due process, but there's another word that you don't put somebody in prison and just keep them on and on and on. They have a right to a trial. I can't think of the word. Need a lawyer in here. Speedy trial, okay. So look at this here then. Why is a speedy trial an act of justice? Because we understand not only does the victim of a criminal deserve justice, but if the criminal is not punished for their wickedness, they will be emboldened and there will be more victims. A couple of thoughts then. A failure to execute swift judgment then incites greater evil. That's why, as a culture, illegal immigrants, let's mention that for a moment. And we're hearing this painted, well, they haven't done anything wrong. Well, the fact that they are illegal immigrants, they've already broken the law. So what happens to a culture when you have 12 million, I think it's probably closer to 30 million illegal immigrants? And they, in coming, from the inception of coming, have violated the law of the land. And there's no punishment. Well, that 12 to 30 million become emboldened in their lawlessness. And so they drive without insurance. They cheat on welfare and Social Security. They vote illegally. It just goes on and on and on. Why? Because there's not been a speedy punishment of that which was wrong. It has a thing to do with political ideology. It has everything to do with spiritual principle. This is a spiritual principle. If the criminal is not punished, they become bolder. That's a fact. So we have truth on our side. It's not a matter of Republican or Democrat. Here's the Word of God, and this is the truth. If you're not speedy to punish the evildoer, they become bolder. Let me give you a second thought that goes with that. A failure to punish sin also hardens the sinner's heart. You know, one of the things that I notice with our politicians, I notice with our whole judicial system here, is that they are flagrant in their wickedness. They lie with impunity. There is no consequence for their evil. They have no shame. They have no sorrow. And then, verses 12 and 13, and I have to close. This continues that whole thing about justice. Ecclesiastes 8, verse 12 and 13. Though a sinner do evil 100 times, and his days be prolonged. Let me find myself. Though a sinner do evil 100 times, and his days be prolonged or lengthened, yet surely I know that it shall be well with them that fear God, which fear before him. In other words, Solomon is looking and he says, it seems like some criminals do evil 100 times, and they continue to live a long life, and there are no consequences. But Solomon's observation is inevitably there will be consequences for the wickedness that they have perpetuated. And then verse 13, it shall not be well. Let me see if I got it up there. No. Okay, I need to wrap up. It shall not be well with the wicked, neither shall he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he feareth not before God. The point that he's making is this. It may look like the wicked get away with their sin, but there will be consequences. There will be a payday someday. And then lastly, verse 14. There is a vanity which is done upon the earth, that there be just men unto whom it happeneth according to the work of the wicked, again, and there be wicked to whom it happeneth according to the work of the righteous. And I said that this is also vanity. I'll sum it up with this. Sometimes you look at life and you see the innocent suffer, and you say, well, that's not fair. And then you look at the wicked who have done wicked things, and you say, they got away with it. Well, that's not fair. And so it seems like now get this, it seems like the innocent get punished and the wicked escape punishment. And he said, well, that's not fair. But what we know as believers is inevitably God is going to be judge. And there will be a day of justice. So rather than our spirits being heavy because there seems like there's no justice in the land, let us look at the long view, because God is the judge. And it might look evil now, but inevitably God will punish the evildoers. Close with a thought. The lifespan, I wish there was a test done of the lifespan of the unbelievers, the wicked, and believers who have lived righteously. And I think you would find, generally speaking, those who live righteously are going to live a long life. Those who live wickedly are going to end up receiving in their bodies the brokenness and the weight of sorrow and sin. For instance, our culture is epidemic with depression. Well, not all depression comes from wickedness, but a whole lot of it does. So God in the end is judged, and he is just. And let us trust God.